Jeremiah the prophet, the 2nd chapter, speaks for God. He reminds you of the blood of the poor innocents. And it will not be forgotten. It will not be forgotten. 47 million. Think of it. Here, you probably heard the news reports and the Attorney General. The area is looking at what's happening, I believe, in Kansas City. The same thing is happening in English hospitals all the time, where children who are within hours or days of a natural and full-term birth are being butchered, murdered. The British Medical Association has gone on record as saying that even after the doctors have done their best to murder them, these children often come into the world and they're still alive, and the doctor who has sworn that he'll give himself to health and healing has to take that infant and kill it again. Kill it again. Shame. I want to tell you, no nation, not even with the resources of this nation, not even with the wealth of this nation and the armies and the weapons of this nation, not any nation can long survive with such shameful wickedness upon its skirts. But on top of all that, there's one thing in our Bible reading that I'm sure you noticed that will enable us to discern the crowning sin of those nations whose voices we now hear from hell. In verse 19, 21, 24, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30, 32, there is this reference to the uncircumcised. The uncircumcised. And without getting into all the details, the evident meaning is we're dealing with people who had no interest in God's covenant mercies, and so they perished. In the case of this nation, these voices from hell, and what they have to say to America today is that if you're divorced from God and you're divorced from His covenant and you're cut off from the mercies of His covenant, you're in trouble. Big time. Remember the words of the 9th Psalm and the 17th verse? It's a scary, scary proposition. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. The nations that forget God. I am not going to get into the thorny issue of church and state tonight. There's a whole lot more to be said on that issue than most American Christians imagine. But we have a generation, even among Bible believers, who have so bought in to the secular definition of separation of church and state that they believe that it is wrong even to have any concept of the state supporting or the state admitting or the state establishing or the state looking favorably upon what is good and what is godly. Now I want you to stop and think for a minute. I'm not advocating that the American government establish the Free Presbyterian Church as the state national religion. Not advocating it. I would run a million miles from that, to be quite honest. Nothing would destroy us more quickly. But what I'm saying to you is this. There's no neutral ground. Let's understand this. There is no such thing as being neutral in the great war with God. Jesus said it. Don't take my word. Jesus said it. You're either for me or you're against me. Now, is that plain? You're for me or you're against me. No middle ground. I've often reminded you of a meeting of pastors in Chicago that I attended when I was not long in the United States. These were leading fundamental pastors and good men. One and all, good men. Dr. Bob Jr. was the chairman of that meeting, and they sat around. I felt really out of my depth because it was a large hotel, and I wasn't used, this little fella from Ulster, I wasn't used to anything like the grandeur of these meetings, but I was there. Why I was there, I have no idea. But I was there. And they were discussing the moral majority. And Jerry Falwell's activities at that time. Now, there was a whole lot wrong with the concept of the moral majority. But the constant criticism that was being picked up against Dr. Falwell and his moral majority was that they were seeking to legislate morality. And of course that's wrong. And the pastors were drawing up a resolution against legislating morality. And I'm sitting there saying, I know I'm only a country bumpkin. I know I'm only in from Northern Ireland. But am I really hearing what I'm hearing? Are all these learned men, are they all going crazy? And so I said to the preacher beside me, whom I knew, I said, you better speak up here. He says, why? I said, well, do you want the government to legislate immorality? You're either going to legislate morality or you're going to legislate immorality. You're either going to legislate the murder of the unborn or the protection of the unborn. You're either going to legislate sodomy or you're going to legislate what the Bible says against sodomy. There's no middle ground here. So I said, do you really want the government to legislate immorality? He said, no. I said, well, then you better speak up, because if these fellas put this resolution through, they're going to condemn the government and those who would ask them to legislate morality. I want the government to legislate moral and righteous laws. I want that. And the closer they get to the divine standard of the law of God and everything moral, the happier I'll be. And so he did speak up. I know some of you will not find it easy to believe.